I turned a baby toy into a weapon. Sounds crazy, I know. Maybe it is. When the Mafia sends a note to your house saying they're taking your 4-year-old daughter away, madness stops being a disease and becomes the only sensible option for survival. They looked at Graceland and saw a rock and roll palace, easy to invade. They didn't know that, to protect my princess, I was willing to hide hell. Oh, hey, inside a simple plastic rattle, I'll be honest with you. People think they know what it's like to be the king. They see the white jumpsuits embroidered with precious stones, the pink Cadillacs, the private jets with gold faucets, the crowds screaming my name until they lose their voices. They think of Graceland as a fairy tale palace, a place made of music, peanut butter, and eternal bliss. And for a while, God knows it was. It was the American dream realized. But there was one year, a cursed year, that I try to erase from my memory with medication and prayers, when Graceland became something else. It ceased to be a home. It became a gilded coffin. It became the luxury prison that I myself built brick by brick to protect the only thing that truly mattered in my life, the only thing that money couldn't replace. I was at my peak, yes. My Vegas shows were sold out for years. But the peak is a lonely and dangerous place. The peak attracts vultures. And in America back then, vultures didn't circle in the sky. They wore Italian suits, had hard-to-pronounce first and last names, and often they were connected to families who didn't like to hear the word no. The threat didn't arrive with fireworks or roadside shootouts. Real evil never makes a sound when it arrives. It prefers silence. It arrived on a rainy autumn afternoon, delivered by an anonymous messenger who looked like he'd stepped out of a bad Western movie, hat pulled down and hands in his pockets. It was a thick, brown envelope, with no return address, left in the hand of my head of security and old friend Red West. Red brought it to me in the music room, the jungle room. I was sitting at the piano, trying to learn a new gospel song, seeking some peace in the ivory keys, trying to connect with God. But the peace fled the room as soon as I saw the color in Red's face. He was a tough man, a guy who had broken noses for me, but there, he looked pale. "What is this, Red?" I asked, stopping playing. I already felt that cold feeling in my stomach, that chill that only appears when you know, deep down in your soul, that life is about to change for the worse. Red didn't need to say much. His voice cracked. He just handed me the paper. I opened it. It wasn't a fan letter asking for an autograph or a sweaty handkerchief. It was a short note, typed on an old typewriter, cold, professional, emotionless. It came from people who weren't messing around. They listed demands. They wanted a huge slice of my business, percentages of my tours, control over certain decisions, pure and simple extortion. But that wasn't what chilled me to the bone. It was the final line. The final line made me forget how to breathe. He said bluntly in capital letters, "If the king doesn't cooperate, the princess will go for a walk. She's too pretty to grow up in Memphis." The princess, Lisa Marie. At that moment, the famous singer, the sex symbol, the Elvis Presley the world knew, disappeared. He died in that room. All that remained was a father, and my world collapsed. My Lisa Marie had just turned 4. 4 years old. She had blonde curls that looked like they were made of sunshine, those huge blue eyes that looked like 2 deep swimming pools, and the purest laugh that money couldn't buy. She was the light. She was the reason I endured the road, the fame, the madness, and now she was the target. I felt a rage I never knew existed. I tore the paper into pieces so small they looked like snow. I threw the piano bench aside with a kick that almost broke my foot. I screamed. I screamed in a way I don't think I've ever screamed on stage, not even in the most ecstatic moments of rock and roll. It was the scream of a wounded animal, the scream of a father. From that moment on, Graceland ceased to be a home. It became a maximum-level military installation. I called everyone. The entire Memphis Mafia, my cousins, my childhood friends, the bodyguards I trusted with my life. I gathered them all in the living room. I looked each of them in the eye, holding my pistol in my hand so they would understand the gravity of the situation, and said, "The money's gone, the party's over, the girls, the fun, the trips, forget it. Now we're at war, and the enemy has no face." The first thing I did was have everything closed off. It wasn't just the main gate with the musical notes that tourists love to photograph anymore. That was just decoration. I had cameras installed in every blind corner of the property, infrared systems imported from Germany, motion sensors on the lawn that even the Pentagon didn't have at the time. I wanted to put heavy iron bars on all the windows of the mansion, but Priscilla begged me not to. She cried, said it would make the place look like a real prison, that it would scare Lisa. I gave in on the visible bars, out of love for them, but I had all the original glass removed. I had bulletproof glass, 3 inches thick, installed in absolutely every window and glass door. Nothing could get in there, not a bullet, not a stone, not a sound. I spent more on security in 1 week than most small towns in Mississippi spent in an entire year. But I didn't care. I would burn every dollar of my fortune if it kept the monsters out. Paranoia was no longer a feeling. It was a way of life. It was a poison coursing through my veins, and I couldn't stop drinking from it. I no longer trusted the telephone. I thought it was tapped. I didn't trust the mail. Everything was X-rayed before it went in. I didn't trust the food that came from the kitchen if I didn't see who prepared it. He didn't trust the driver bringing the supplies. I walked around the house day and night, patrolling the hallways like a ghost with a gun in my hand. Yes, I had a famous gun collection. But those weren't collector's items to show off to friends anymore. They were my survival tools. I knew how to shoot. I was good at it, and I swore before God and the devil that if if someone tried to touch a single hair on my daughter's head, I would raise hell on earth before I dropped. Lisa Marie's routine was shattered. A 4-year-old child doesn't understand why the world has shrunk. She could no longer play in the front garden, nor on the side lawn where she liked to chase the dogs. She could only stay in the back of the house, in the walled yard, and even then she had to have at least 3 armed men, disguised as gardeners or pool attendants, watching her every move, every breath. "Daddy, why can't we go out? Why can't we go get ice cream?" she would ask, in that sweet voice that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. I would make up stupid excuses, swallowing back tears. "The weather's bad, darling, it's going to rain." Or, "We have a special game to play in here today, just the 2 of us." But she felt it. Children are emotional radars, aren't they? They sense the tension in the air better than adults. She saw the seriousness in the faces of the men who used to play with her. She saw the way I held her, almost crushing her against my chest, every time I picked her up, as if I were trying to fuse her to my body to protect her. I even distanced myself from Priscilla, not because I didn't love her, but because, in my fear-ridden mind, I couldn't trust anyone who could be used against me. I started imagining terrible scenarios. What if the Mafia kidnapped her mother to get to her daughter? What if they bribed someone on my team who had gambling debts? What if they used one of my cousins? I saw betrayal in every smile. I saw traps in every shadow cast on the corridors of Graceland. I remember the night everything changed, the night of the idea. I was in my room upstairs, which looked more like a fortified bunker than a master suite. I couldn't sleep. I must have taken about 3 strong tranquilizers, but my body was electric, wired at 220 volts of anxiety. The silence of the house disturbed me more than the noise. I went down the stairs barefoot, walking through the dark corridors, lit only by the red emergency lights I'd installed. It looked like a submarine on combat alert. I passed her room. The door was ajar, and I went in, holding my breath. Lisa Marie was asleep, lying on her side, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding her. Her thumb was in her mouth, and a small, crumpled silk blanket was near her face. The scene was so peaceful, so pure, that it almost made me fall to my knees and cry with relief and despair at the same time. That image was proof that I still had something sacred to defend in a profane world. I sat on the floor beside the crib, watching her chest rise and fall. And it was there, in that oppressive silence surrounded by teddy bears and dolls, that the idea, the craziest, most dangerous and desperate idea of my life began to take shape. I started thinking like an intruder. I knew the outer defenses were strong. High walls, electric gates, armed guards. No one would get through the gates unnoticed. But what if they came from inside? What if it was quick? What if it was a lightning attack, a 2-minute slip-up, the time it would take one of my men to go to the bathroom or look away? I needed a defense that wasn't a human guard. Guards sleep. Guards get distracted. Guards can be bought. I needed something that was, she needed something all the time that was part of her world, something she would never let go of. I looked at the toys scattered on the floor, cars, colorful books, rag dolls, and then my eyes fell on a small yellow and blue plastic object that was lying near the foot of the bed. It was a rattle, a simple baby rattle, one of those cheap ones that make a soft rattling sound when you shake it. She had a special attachment to it. She called it the little noise. She took it everywhere, to the dining table, to the sofa, even to the bath. At that moment, the King of Rock had a dark epiphany. I realized that my last line of defense wouldn't be an M16 assault rifle, but a child's toy. I picked up the rattle. It was light, innocent, harmless. Any professional kidnapper who entered her room would see the rattle and simply throw it aside. They would be looking for alarms on the wall, for panic buttons hidden under the mattress, for telephones. They would never, ever, in a million years, look for a threat inside a plastic toy. "That's it," I whispered to myself in the dark. "Let's hide hell where no one would think to look." The idea was absurd. I know. Bizarre. But paranoia had driven me to a point where the absurd seemed like the only possible logic. If the enemy was invisible and relentless, my weapon would also have to be invisible. I spent the rest of the night awake, sketching diagrams on a napkin, planning. It couldn't just be a simple alarm that went beep beep. They'd destroy a loud alarm by stomping on it. It had to be something that would give an immediate physical response, and most importantly, give me time, the precious seconds between the attack and my arrival. The next morning, as soon as the sun rose, I called George. Not George Klein, another George. A technician I'd brought in from the Air Force, a reclusive electronics genius who looked after my complex sound systems and reel-to-reel tape recorders. Now, he would look after the survival of my lineage. I pulled him into my private office, closed the double doors, locked them, and placed the rattle on the glass table. George looked at me, scratching his head, as if I were finally losing my mind for good, and maybe I was. "Elvis, what is this?" he asked, picking up the toy. "This, George," I said, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "is our life insurance. It's the only thing that will stand between Lisa and them if everything else fails. I need you to take this thing apart. I need you to open this plastic without leaving a mark. Take out the bells, take out whatever it is, and put inside it the smallest, most powerful, and most discreet piece of technology you can create." I saw the confusion on his face. "Technology for what, boss?" "To record the nanny." I shook my head negatively, seriously. "No, George. I want a panic and restraint device. I want that. If this rattle is shaken with abnormal force, the force of a pull, a struggle, a kidnapping, it activates 3 things simultaneously." I raised 3 fingers, trembling from caffeine and lack of sleep. "First, I want a silent coded radio signal straight to my pager and to the security room console. No sirens in the bedroom so as not to scare Lisa. The alarm goes off. with me. Second, I want this signal to trigger the locker lock protocol. I want the magnetic locks on the 3 exits of Graceland to close automatically. Nobody gets out. George was mentally taking notes, pale. And the third one, Elvis? I hesitated. I took a deep breath. This was the part that crossed the line. This was the part that turned a father into a mad scientist. Third, I want him to have a charge, an active countermeasure. A cargo? George asked, confused. Explosive? No! Have you gone mad? My daughter will be holding this. I want a shock charge, a high-voltage, low-amperage electrical discharge. Capacitors. I want the rattle's body to become a disguised taser. If anyone tries to snatch it from her hand, or if she flinches in panic near the attacker, I want the guy to get a shock strong enough to paralyze his arm. I want his muscles to lock up and him to release it out of pure biological reflex. Understand? I want it to hurt, George. I want the bastard to feel the lightning strike. George swallowed hard. He was a radio technician, not a CIA armorer. Elvis, this is very dangerous. It's illegal to modify objects like that. What if Lisa accidentally fires it? What if she gets hurt? I don't care about the law. I am the law within these walls. And about Lisa, you're going to calibrate the acceleration sensor. It has to be a sudden, violent movement. A high G. The playful swing can't activate. It has to be a pulling motion. Can you do that? Can you save my daughter? He looked at the rattle, then at my face. He saw that I wasn't asking. I was begging and ordering at the same time. It's going to take time, George whispered. I'll need mercury batteries, tiny Japanese capacitors. I'll have to insulate the cable so the child doesn't get shocked. Only the person holding the toy's body. Do it. Spend whatever it takes. I want it done in 48 hours. And so the marathon began. While the newspapers said I was throwing parties, I was locked away, overseeing the creation of a disguised weapon. The rattle was given a code name, the Guardian Angel. 48 hours later, George returned. He looked like a zombie with deep, dark circles under his eyes. He placed the rattle in my hand. It looked identical, the same weight, the same sound. But inside it was a marvel of paranoid engineering. It's ready, he said. Inertial sensor calibrated. If pulled, the capacitor discharges onto the outer surface. Battery lasts a week. The radio signal reaches all the way to the gate. I went to Lisa's room. I handed her the toy. Princess, Daddy fixed your rattle. Promise you'll always keep it with you? It's a magic amulet now. She smiled and embraced the danger, unaware that she was holding a lightning bolt in her hands. Time dragged on. 10 days of silence. Waiting is worse than death. I lived in the security room, surrounded by monitors, drinking black coffee until my stomach burned. And then, on the 10th night, at 3:15 in the morning, the nightmare became reality. I was almost dozing off in my chair. Suddenly, the laundry room monitor, the most discreet service entrance, flickered. It wasn't an alarm. It was an image malfunction, a blur of static. Someone had tampered with the camera, professionals. I jumped out of my chair, spilling my coffee. George, alert! Laundry! I pulled my Colt 1911 from its holster. The blood drained from my head. I knew instinctively that they were already inside. They had bypassed the external sensors. Lock the exits! Wake Red! I yelled, running for the stairs. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my throat like a hammer. The house was in absolute silence, a deathly silence. I ran into Lisa Marie's hallway. Her bedroom door was closed. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, sweating profusely. And then, the sound. It wasn't crying. It wasn't a shout of Daddy. It was a snap-dry, electric, zzzt, immediately followed by a dull thud of something heavy falling onto the carpet, and a muffled, hoarse groan of pain and surprise. On my belt, the pager vibrated violently, turning on the red light. Activity in the princess's room. The guardian angel had sung. I kicked the door with all my might. The wood gave way. I went inside, gun in hand, ready to kill. The scene, God, the scene. The hallway light illuminated the room. There was a man, a large man, dressed in black with gloves and a ski mask. But he wasn't standing. He was on his knees, fallen beside the crib. He wasn't holding my daughter. He was holding his own right arm, pressing it against his chest. His arm was trembling uncontrollably, violent spasms. The shock had locked his nerves. The pain had paralyzed him. Lisa Marie sat in her crib, eyes wide, clutching the sheets, startled by the noise, but unharmed, safe. And on the floor, rolling slowly between the intruder and the crib, was the yellow and blue rattle, the plastic hero. The man tried to stand up when he saw me, but his body was still short-circuiting. He looked at me through the holes in his mask, and I saw the terror in his eyes. He had come to kidnap a child and had been knocked down by a toy. "Stay on the ground, don't even breathe!" I yelled, my voice cracking with rage. I pointed the Colt at his head. I wanted to pull the trigger. God knows how much I wanted to. Within seconds, the house lights came on. The outside sirens began to blare. Red West and the security guards stormed the room, weapons drawn, and subdued the intruder, who was still groaning in pain from his numb arm. I dropped the gun on the sofa and ran to the crib. I picked Lisa up, covering her head so she wouldn't see the masked man being dragged outside. "Daddy's here, sweetheart. It's over. Daddy's here." She was trembling. She pointed to the floor, to the rattle. "Daddy!" The toy stung the man. It made light. My heart stopped. She had seen the flash of the electrical contact. "It was just a scare, my love," I lied, kissing her forehead. "It was thunder. The toy protected you." I kicked the rattle away under the bed before she could try to get it again. The battery must still have been warm. We never called the police. You know how these things work when powerful people and the Mafia are involved. The police would ask questions, leak it to the press. We resolved it internally. The message was sent back to the bosses who ordered it. The king doesn't negotiate, the king retaliates. And Graceland isn't an amusement park, it's a death trap. They understood. The direct threat stopped. They saw that I was a man willing to do anything crazy. I had George dismantle the rattled shock mechanism the next morning, but we turned the casing into a gold-plated pendant. Lisa Marie wore that necklace for years. She told her friends it was her lucky charm. She never knew that. For one night, that charm was the most dangerous weapon in the house. I look back at those final years and see how much paranoia cost me. I isolated myself, lost friends, lost my peace. But when I look at my daughter, alive, grown, safe, I know it was worth it. People judge Elvis from his later years, the bloated, sweaty, confused Elvis, but they don't know the weight I carried on my belt. The truth is, on the most important night of my life, my greatest weapon wasn't my velvety voice. It wasn't my money. It wasn't my fame. It was the desperate, sick, and absolute love of a father hidden inside a piece of cheap plastic. I was a monster so I could be a father. And you know what? I would do it all again. For her, I would electrocute the entire world. I am the king. But that night, I was just the princess's bodyguard.